Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Electric Libertyland. I am Brian McWilliams, the one and the only, the host of this here podcast, and this is episode number 236, meaning you can go and find show notes at lionsofliberty.com/episodes/ELL236. I have a very special guest I'm going to bring on in just a minute, but before I do, I want to ask you guys, please do us a favor, join the Patreon as little as $5 a month. A lot of you have just jumped on there, which is great, probably stemming from Mark talking with Clint from Liberty Lockdown, having him on for a bonus episode. Of course, we do a lot of other bonus content. I told you I've got my Do Nothing Man episodes. That's going to be breaking soon as the great Roger Paxton gets back to it, the narration that he's providing, as well as my Good Morning Fuckhead Daily Rants. You can't miss out on those. It's a great time. Sign up, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. So now I'm about to bring on a very special guest here. I'm excited to have her on. Kind of a funny story, which we'll get into as I introduce her here. But welcome to Electric Libertyland, Olivia Rondeau.
Hello, thank you for having me. And yes, it was a weird story, I think.
Yeah, it was. My God. I mean, it's the same way I met actually Clint from Liberty Lockdown, I just mentioned, was on Monday's show. But yeah, we were doing a case race. You weren't partaking, although maybe you were drinking at home. I don't know. I don't know your case race habits.
But I was not drinking.
Okay. So yeah, we had there was a case race that was organized by Will Fight, and I take place in that. And man, I won it, but I lost the battle against my liver, my pride. I know. It was like I lost my memory. It was ridiculous. But you were part of that live Twitter stream. You were taking part and kind of came on at times. And I remember having some drunken interactions with you that were pretty funny, including, I believe, a threat to touch your hair, which is the biggest taboo out there.
That was very strange because I had never talked to Will before either. I never DM'd him. He just sent me a random DM and was like, join this stream, had no explanation, nothing. So I was like, fuck it.
Are you serious? I thought when he invited you to join it, I was like, okay, he must know this Olivia person from somewhere, because that was my first time that I came in interaction with you.
We're mutuals. We're mutuals on Twitter, but we had never like DM'd or talked like that before. So this is funny.
It's so funny. And it's hilarious, and even funnier that you managed to stick around and trust a person like me to have you on his podcast. I don't know about your life decisions here, but anyway, yeah, welcome to the show. You and I have been talking a little bit on Twitter back and forth. And of course, I saw you've been obviously building notoriety. And to give you a formal introduction, for those who are not aware of Olivia and the work she's doing, you are a writer. You are a contributor to Fee, which I love, fee.org, one of my favorite websites. I saw you're writing for them now. You've been a reporter, or I should say a contributor for the Daily Caller, and for, I think there's one other one I'm missing too, right? What was the other one you were writing for?
I'm a columnist at the Rogue Review as well.
Yes, the Rogue Review. And of course, you are also a collegiate wrestler at East Stroudsburg University, and you're studying political science. So you're getting out there. You're throwing some haymakers, I see, on Twitter, in your columns, and also have been really out there making some impressive strides, I guess, in the public sphere. But before I get into that, let me hear a little bit more about your background. What got you into the politics? Tell me a little bit about your evolution as far as the way you see the world and just kind of who you are as a person.
I think the main thing that influenced my politics is my martial arts background and my wrestling background. And to other wrestlers, this makes sense, but a lot of wrestlers are not necessarily like Republican or like hardcore like right wingers, but they're just very like independent and they don't really care what people think about them. So not that they have a lot of extremist views, but they have views that are not like acceptable like to the left. So there's like a lot of conservatives and a lot of libertarian wrestlers that I've met just not even through political events at all, just like happen to be teammates and whatever. So I think me just having the confidence to wrestle in the first place, like being the only girl on my team and stuff, I just like stopped. Can I cuss on here?
Oh God, please.
Okay.
Curse it up, drop fucks, shits, whatever you could say. See you next Tuesday, whatever you want. I don't care.
Okay, I was about to say I stopped giving a fuck because I grew up like very like conscious of what everybody thought of me, and I still am to an extent, like everybody is, but once I started wrestling, I really just kind of dropped the majority of that. And I wouldn't say I grew up in like a strictly like Republican or libertarian household. Like it wasn't super political, but I think the way I was raised, like doing sports, hunting, fishing, shooting guns, that was almost like a conservative or libertarian upbringing. Just the fact that I was brought up in the outdoors and to take care of myself and to be independent and, you know, to stand up for myself. So I think it did influence my politics and the way I speak about politics a lot. Like I feel like if I didn't wrestle, I might be more shy and less likely to like put myself out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I'd had a conversation with a guy drunkenly at a bar, which is how I, you know, get most of my Liberty conversations going, actually. But we were talking about how, wrestling in general, and also the WWE and kind of pro wrestling has a very libertarian streak in it, or a very, I say, individualist streak to it.
I noticed a bunch of WWE wrestlers are randomly following me. Like Dolph Ziggler started following me. I was like,
nice.
I was like, that's cool, I guess, but I don't know why.
I'm telling you, it's because I think it's exactly what you're talking about, though, is that a lot of them, you know, I think there is an individualist mentality that goes along with wrestling. Because even though you're on a team, but it's like you out there. It's a one-on-one skill set. You know, you have to do it. You have to have your own personal drive. And like you said, it's also, for a lot of wrestlers, you do have to give no shits about what people think about you. You're out there in the leotard, you know, the wrestling leotard.
Yeah, it's not.
They don't
cute.
look great.
You don't look cute.
It's not a good look on anybody of any sex. So, you know, it's like one of those things where I do agree with you that it's probably really an independent thinking kind of way to go. And I think that bleeds into like in the mainstream media. And it's one of those things where I really wish more wrestlers like, you know, Glenn Jacobs, I mean, the guy's become mayor, and he's outwardly libertarian. And I wonder if you're going to see a little bit more people get encouraged. And honestly, you might be a part of that, is encouraging these people to speak up more because you are so political.
You know what? It's very interesting because I probably shouldn't name them, but there are certain Olympic wrestlers that follow me on Twitter, and I see them like liking my tweets, but they won't like retweet me. And, you know, I'm pretty sure it's they have a large fan base and like people are watching them and stuff. But I do think a lot of men's and women's wrestlers that are like pretty high level do think very similarly. They do think like have more of a liberty, like independent mindset. And, you know, maybe I am helping kind of to push that out there. And maybe they'll like take the torch and put it on the world stage or something. That would be dope.
Yeah. Well, so you said wrestling definitely helped you get more into the way you were thinking, but did anything else kind of inspire you or bring you to that point of view more so? And when did you start really pay attention to politics? You're a political science major, so clearly that's something that you want to go into more as a professional career. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, this always makes people feel super old, but I was in high school during the 2016 election. I was 15. And
you were right. Yeah. I do feel really old.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
I'm sorry. I just have to do it. And that's when I first started paying attention. And at first I was like pretty like, I went through a phase like right after middle school until I was like 15, 16. I was like pretty liberal, I guess, at least socially liberal. You know, I was still raised to like shoot guns and stuff. So I was never like a complete statist, you know, to that extent. But I was still like I was like still like in that phase where like everybody was like racist or everyone was like sexist or something. So of course my first interaction with politics is like me scrolling through Tumblr or like just like me talking to my little friends in English class, like, oh my God, did you hear this white supremacist Donald Trump is running for president? You know, me and my little friends are, you know, jabbing or whatever. And then I noticed some of the guys on my wrestling team were actually like pretty pro-Trump. And it kind of shocked me because they were not like racist. One of them was black and he was like the most like MAGA guy I've ever met. And I was like, this really confused me. Like, this is not computing with what I've been told. So I go home. I'm like, Dad, like these kids at school are crazy. Like half of them are telling me that Trump is a white supremacist. And the other half, including some of my friends who are black on the wrestling team, they like Trump. And my dad's black. And he was like, well, I like Trump. He's not a white supremacist. And I was like, how could you? Like, I was a little offended at first. But then, you know, I started digging into it. I'm like, holy shit. Like, that's when I started digging into, like, the Clinton crime family and shit. And I was like, holy shit. Like, the Democrats are protecting these people. I cannot be a Democrat. Even if I did have more socially liberal, like, tendencies, especially back then, I was like, I cannot, like, support the Democrats, at least this election cycle. And then as I'm going into Trump's history, I'm like, okay, did he actually do anything that was as bad as people were saying it. And I just found that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I progressed,
sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting because you talked about finding, going in and finding your, more information, diving deep the internet. I mean, this is something I've heard this story, or maybe not this exact story, but I've heard people that were around your age set, that age range of 15, 16, 17, 18 that are now just going to college, actually coming around to view and separate themselves from this groupthink mentality in the same way.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine's daughter who's she's 16 now, but she hates Kamala Harris. And, she hates her because she looked into all of this stuff that she's done as a prosecutor, as a DA, where she's keeping evidence, she's keeping people in jail, she's threatening people with, putting them in prison if their kids don't show up on school and stuff, really terrible things. And I feel like your generation has much more capability and capacity for getting to the truth than any other generation before you. So that's like breaking that stranglehold the mainstream media is trying to keep on everybody.
Yeah, we definitely have an advantage and also kind of a disadvantage, because the reason I thought that Trump is a white supremacist and the Republicans were all neo-Nazis it wasn't like I was sitting at home watching CNN as a middle schooler. I was on the internet, talking to my internet friends who were saying the same thing. So I think it can go both ways.
Yeah.
So, I fall into this kind of MAGA mentality for a hot minute. And so I'm not a Democrat. And I didn't know what being a libertarian was. I didn't know what being unaffiliated was. So I was like, I guess I'll just be a Republican.
Almost nobody knows what being a libertarian is nowadays. Even if you research it, it's still very hard to describe.
But I never even heard of it. I had no idea there was even a third choice. Yeah. So I did support Trump. I still like the guy, but now I'm just looking back on it being like, okay, now that I'm more consistent on my beliefs and I can actually pinpoint the policies that I like and don't like, I'm looking back on when I was a hardcore MAGA person and being like, that's not really consistent with what I believe now. But the only real reason I kind of settled for that was because I really didn't think there was any other choice. So the things I liked about Trump were I liked how he wasn't trying to start any new wars. I liked that. I mean, this is very anti-libertarian. I'm pretty strong in immigration. I liked that. I like the way he talked. I like that he's a businessman. But then I was looking at some of the other stuff that a lot of his supporters support, which is fine. You're allowed to have your own opinions, but I'm not a super big Israel first Zionist person. That was something that a lot of the Trump base cared about. And I found myself when I first became a Trump supporter, I was just retweeting, whatever Trump would retweet, or retweeting whatever his supporters would retweet. So I ended up retweeting a lot of stuff oh my God, yes, Trump is sending this money to Israel. He's Israel first. I'm wait, why is that even a good thing?
Why are we sending anybody foreign aid, let alone Israel, which has so much money, so much power, so much? We give them military armaments that we can't even use. I mean, it's insane to support it.
Yeah, and the other thing was the thin blue line thing, which when I was a kid, I've never been a cop worshiper or anything, but I went from being well, there's only a couple bad cops, but it's not their fault because they're just following orders, to now being well, they sign up for the job knowing that they're going to have to follow those orders. So yeah, the whole system kind of needs to be reformed. So those are the two main things. The foreign aid thing, I don't want to say I'm anti-Israel. I'm just saying the ultra-Zionism and the foreign aid thing specifically to Israel that every Trump supporter thought was so amazing and so groundbreaking when it really isn't. And that honestly, both parties support a huge amount of foreign aid to Israel. So that wasn't super fun. And then the whole thin blue line thing. So then I was okay, there has to be, another choice, because I do agree with Trump supporters on a lot of things. I'm not ragging on the people that, supported me originally or whatever. I did vote for Trump in 2020. It is what it is. But then I started feeling okay, well, I'm passionate about things like ending the war on drugs. I'm passionate about things like criminal justice reform. So maybe I'm more of a libertarian. Now, I haven't registered as a libertarian for numerous reasons. I'm never registered.
Well, number one, you get on a government watch list immediately. You're labeled an extremist as per the threats of the Biden administration. That's one good reason to avoid that.
I'm on a couple lists at this point, just based on my online activity. But yeah, I'm unaffiliated now. I'm open to vote for Republicans or libertarians. I can't picture myself voting for a Democrat at this point in time unless they were just completely against the Democrat platform. But who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me a little bit about we know you're obviously, like I said, you've blown up, and I want to come back around to this because you were on Pause with Sam J, and I was curious how that came about because that was, it's a big platform on HBO Max. She's a stand-up comedian.
That happened so randomly. I couldn't even tell you how that came about. That
really? Yeah. So it didn't happen through like a, I thought maybe it was like, a tweet blew up or somebody connected you that way because she must have heard about you through the grapevine in some way of speaking though, because, you're young. Like I said, she wanted to talk to like young Black conservatives at the time. And now you'd already had, I think, a little evolution from your previous position. Like you said, no longer so much as the MAGA person. But, I mean, it goes to show you though, the fact that they're aware of you goes to show that your point of view is getting through, and that the fact that they have you on means that there's definitely a segment of the population that's looking to hear more voices like yours.
Yeah, and that was confirmed after I got off the show because it got like my inbox and my followers like blew up after that. But I could never pinpoint where they, found me from. If it was Twitter, from YouTube, if they saw me on like a different podcast or interview or something, I could never really pinpoint it because it was one day back in like February, I think I got an email. It looked like it was spam, honestly. I got an email that was saying that she was a casting director with HBO, saying that she was working on the Untitled Sam J project. I didn't even know what it was at that point. And said that she was looking for one female and one male Black conservative and asking if I would be okay with it or if I knew anybody else. So originally I recommended like 2 or 3 of my other friends to do it because they were actually this email actually specifically asked for a Republican. And I was like, I called her and I was like, hey, I really appreciate it. I would love to do it. But a disclaimer, I don't know if I'm exactly what you're looking for because I'm biracial. Like, I don't know if you wanted like somebody who has like, the quote unquote full Black experience. The real
Black credentials. Yeah.
I don't know if I had like the N-word pass or whatever, because we ended up saying the N-word a lot in that show, but I guess I did. And I didn't know if they wanted somebody who was a card-carrying, like, registered Republican. And I informed them of that I was half white and not a Republican, but just a conservative or conservatarian or whatever. And, we went back and forth for a little bit. And she called around and tried to recruit some other people, and then got back to me. It was like, hey, actually, we really like you. And that was that. And then so she asked me if I knew a male guest. And I recommended like 2 friends, and we ended up settling on King Randall, which was a coincidence because I had him on my podcast like the day before I got that email or something. Like, it was crazy. So we had just barely met, just over StreamYard. That was it. But then the next month I was getting flown out to New York, and I was there for like, I don't know, like a week or so, because I had to quarantine for like 5 or 6 days in Brooklyn, and I couldn't leave my hotel room for 6 days. But it was like a really bougie hotel room, and they kept coming back to refill the mini bar. So I was like set,
nice.
I was chilling, to be honest. I didn't really mind.
Yeah. No, well, and I thought you did a good job on the show, conveying. I mean, I also appreciated Sam J. You probably appreciate this as well. Her interviewing style was good. It wasn't a confrontational approach, which I thought was interesting. Tell me a little bit about the interactions with her. Yeah. And also, I want to know, what was it on camera? What did she cut out? Is there anything you remember specifically that she cut out?
The real interview was like an hour and a half, and the episode the part I was in was like 15 minutes. So there was a lot that ended up getting edited out, which is fine because I understand to have a time constraint to meet. It wasn't like I felt misrepresented at all, because I felt like,
okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like the points that they narrowed it down to were the points that I cared the most about. So a lot of the stuff that they cut out, it was a lot of filler, or just a lot of my points about subjects that weren't really connected to Black conservatism, which was what the episode about. Like, I talked about like immigration and stuff like that, but I guess it wasn't really that relevant to the
Oh, hold on. I lost you for a second. Hold on. Olivia, are you there? Hold on. I lost you for a sec. You cut out on me for a minute. Okay. Can you still see me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, you cut out. So it said that you lost it a little bit. You're talking about immigration, and then I think you started cutting out on me a little bit.
Okay. So she was asking about immigration and like all these different topics, but I guess they wanted to keep the theme centered towards like racial conservatism and like economics, which is basically what we kept the episode to. But on the couple calls I had with the producer before I even flew to New York, and the day like before I went to set, I actually like Skyped with Sam before, like the day before, and she was like, look, I know that, you know, you think that on a liberal platform or something, somebody's going to try to come for you. That's not what I'm here for. I just want to understand. And also, I had talked to King, like me and King were like hanging out in the hotel and stuff, talking about what we were going to, not like a game plan,
strategizing behind the scenes.
not really, but I was.
That's a good idea, though. I mean, shit, you might as well.
Well, I was telling him I was grateful that he was the male guest they picked, because I won't name names, but they did tell me some of the other choices for the male guests that they had in mind on their short list. And I was like, you know, I could probably get along with those people, but we wouldn't be putting on a united front for Black conservatism. You know what I mean? Like, there's a couple different factions of Black conservatives. And I was just glad that me and King were representing a united front of people who consider themselves pro-Black, pro-freedom, you know, pro-family, pro-capitalism. Like, we had a lot of the same shit in common. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, so we get on set, and it was honestly a whirlwind. We didn't talk to Sam at all until we were literally recording. Like, there was no like backstage meeting or anything like that. They shoved us out on the set, and we were just like sitting there talking, and it was pretty nerve-wracking. But after a couple minutes, I realized like she really wasn't there to like attack me. Like, she wasn't like accusing me or pointing her finger. Like, how could you do this? How could you, you know, sell out your race or sell out your family or whatever? Like, it was I could tell she genuinely wanted to know, or at least wanted to portray, you know, my message to her audience. So that was pretty dope.
Yeah, well, and it was interesting. And I remember I was watching it. I was kind of binge watching it one night, and I sent you a Twitter message. But this was something, I mean, and I thought it was very brave. But you had, you know, said on the show, you said, this is the first time saying this, but I'm coming out as bisexual, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if you pre-planned that. This is what I want to ask you about. I didn't think so. But I mean, I have to say though, shit, I mean, it's like, it's something where, you know, it's a two-pronged question. You know, one is, you know, how you felt in the immediate aftermath of that. If you got off and you were like, oh shit, what did I just do?
Oh yeah, it was nerve-wracking on and off camera. It was a day, but that story actually kind of started the night before, and it wasn't really planned at all. I'm telling you right now, it wasn't planned. But I have a gay friend who lives in New York. His name is Mikey. He works with the Walkaway movement, like with Brandon Straka and all those other like gay conservative people. And I love him, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. So like, we met for dinner the night before. And he didn't know I was bi either. And so I was just talking to him about it and how I felt like I was kind of trapped in, I wouldn't say I was trapped in like a lie, because it's not like I was going around saying like, I'm straight and you're lying if you say I'm not. But it was like I wasn't being open with it. And I was just expressing how depressed I felt. And I was expressing how I was very scared, like somebody could like expose me, like post screenshots or post pictures like, you know, I didn't know if somebody would be vengeful or whatever. And I did have, this didn't come from somebody I had been involved with, but I did have like random comments every once in a while. Like, oh, I know Olivia is like lesbian or gay. She's just hiding. It's only a matter of time before somebody exposes her. And it would come from liberals. It would come from people who thought that I was,
of course.
It would come from people who thought I was like a self-hating conservative who like was trying to like suppress my sexuality or whatever, which is what I was when I was like younger, but not now. I just wasn't comfortable to like share it. Anyway, so I'm telling him all this, and he's like, oh, just go home and like come out to your mom, because your mom will be accepting. And I was like, okay, like, in a couple of days when I get home, like I'll tell my mom. And that was really the end of the discussion. The next day, you know, I knew that Sam Day was lesbian, obviously. Like, I had like seen some of her stuff before, knew she had a girlfriend, all that. But I did not anticipate her asking me that, just because that wasn't the topic of the episode at all. It was more racial focused, not like sexual orientation focused at all. But I guess I probably should have anticipated that, just because if you are gay, you probably are wondering what a conservative would think about you some level. So when she asked that, and King just kind of gave a straight up answer, and he's a religious dude. He's not, I wouldn't say he's like pro LGBT, like as the movement, but he's an accepting person, like towards individuals. So he was just like, he runs this organization, the X for Boys in Albany, Georgia. And he was just like, if I have a boy that comes to me that's gay, or he feels like he's a girl, that's whatever. Like, he can still join the program. Like, it's whatever. Like, he'll just accept anybody. It's not his business. And then she turns.
I liked your article on Fee, by the way, about him. It was really interesting.
Oh,
sorry, not to get off topic. Yeah, stay on topic. It was a great article.
He's more famous than Manny deserves to be. So you should interview him next. But
gladly, yeah.
But so then Sam turns to me, and I was just like, I felt like my face turned like so bright, like bright red. I don't know if it showed up on camera, but I literally felt like my face burning. I felt so embarrassed. And I just like didn't want to lie, because I felt like if I would say some generic answer like, oh yeah, I love gay marriage, and somebody was gonna like dig some shit up on me, you know, scroll through Instagram or Twitter or find screenshots and be like, she's lying, like she's gay, like, you know what I mean? Like I thought somebody was gonna like come out and expose me. And I felt like it was a safe space too, because I didn't know King that well, but we were already like friends at this point because we were stuck in the fucking hotel for a week, and
right, exactly.
we could only hang out with each other.
Your quarantine buddies.
Yeah, we were basically quarantine buddies. And then of course Sam was gay, so I didn't feel like I was in like a homophobic environment. However, there was like 35 producers around us off like on the side of the camera at all times. So I was like, this is like it wasn't like it was just like King, her, and the camera. It was like a shit ton of people around. So I did feel very nervous, and at the time I didn't even say I was bi. Like I didn't even specify because I couldn't even put a label on it. I was just like so uncomfortable to even say it. She just asked like, Olivia, like, what are your thoughts on like queer people? And I was like, I'm part of that community, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so after the show aired, like I got so many messages like, you're lesbian, like you're gay, you're trans. Like people were just trying to guess because they just put weird, and which is fine. I just like don't use the term. I just don't use that label, but it was whatever.
Yeah, well, it's like I said. I mean, it's interesting to see it happen. I was like, oh shit. Well, there you go. But like I said, it's hard to do. It's really putting yourself out there a lot, and you don't know what the response is going to be. And hopefully we're talking a little bit about,
it was surprisingly good. I thought that maybe a bunch of conservatives that have followed me might have said some nasty shit, and a little bit, but less than I expected, which is good because the people who had followed me who just assumed I was straight. I had always been pro-gay marriage and shit on my page anyway, so it wasn't like it was a surprise that I was, pro-gay people. It was just a surprise that I was one of them. So
yeah. Well, do you think? I mean, it's kind of interesting. I was wondering if that in any way, obviously. Being half black helps a little bit in, fending off the progressives, I would hope. And, I was wondering if that also, saying, look, I'm bi, I'm part of the community, if that has given you any sort of inroads with people listening a little bit more towards your message, what you have to say, or attacking you less, or has it made them attack you more because they feel similar to what you'd said some other people have voiced, like you're betraying the cause now that they know even more so that you're something that should align with progressives and Democrats and all that shit. Yeah.
It's a little bit of both. And one of the most interesting critiques I've got is like, oh, she's half black and she's half gay. Like she can't even fucking pick one. Like she can't even put the box. Like that, I really got that comment. I was like, you know what? That's a funny joke. I might be depressed about it later, but that's funny.
Well, at least that's if you're laughing at it, though, you're owning it. That's the important thing. It's like, that's what you have to view this, though. It's you're gonna have so many shitty people out there, and you just gotta laugh it off. It's like that's where your wrestle mentality, the individuality, comes into play, right?
Yeah, for sure. But then after I got off the show, I had like an outpouring of messages from gay people, mostly gay black people who were not Republican, were not right wing in the slightest, who were outpouring their support for me, being like, I am a liberal, I'm a Democrat, but I like, I'll just support anyone who is brave enough to say that. And so I ended up receiving a lot of LGBT or black followers who were not Republican, not libertarian at all. And so I think that increased my platform and increased my reach to people who probably would never have followed me if they didn't know that. So I think
exactly.
There's more of a positive, there's more of a benefit than a negative.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. Well, and it's a benefit to you personally too. It's like your emotional sense of well-being, not having to worry about that coming out. That's got to be the biggest weight off. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel very relieved.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then, talking about how you're received by people, on campus. I don't know how East Stroudsburg University is. It's in PA, which is where I'm from. You might detect a little Philly accent in me. So I was curious to see, and I went to Penn State, but I was curious to see, how liberal is the campus? Is it as liberal as anywhere else? And do you have people on campus? Do they give you shit for being out there and being more conservative? Do you get any side eye from people or any of that kind of shit, or are you pretty much just all good?
We'll see when I go back to campus, because this whole past year I've been online because of COVID. We didn't have online.
That's right.
We didn't have in-person school at all. And so I'm a junior. I'm going to be a third year this year. So my freshman year I did do in person. And I was on Twitter and I was on YouTube and stuff, but I want to say I had probably under 30,000, which is like, I know it's still like a sizable amount, but I wasn't like nearly as blown up as I am now. Like that was before I was on TV and stuff. So certain people knew, but it was mainly just people I told. Like it wasn't like people were like finding my Twitter and trying to cancel me and stuff. Fast forward to a couple months ago, a year ago, I did a video with the Daily Caller about transgender athletes in sports, and it really blew up. It got like well over.
I want to talk to you about that. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah, tell me your take on it. 'Cause I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, especially with the Olympics coming up and the two Olympic stories. Obviously, the sprinter who's been suspended for smoking weed, which is ridiculous, and then the transgender athlete from New Zealand, I believe, competing in weightlifting. So, tell me a little bit about your article and then we can get into your thoughts on that, or your video, I should say, and then your thoughts on that.
Well, let me finish my little anecdote first.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. So I came up with that video. It got like well over 1 million views and went hella viral. And I had hella people I knew sending that to me, being like, is this you? My little brother who just watches gaming YouTubers all the time, like he's 14, who watches gaming YouTubers all the time. One of his favorite big gaming YouTubers posted the video, and he was freaked out that he saw his sister on his his favorite gaming YouTuber channel or whatever. And one day the one liberal kid on my wrestling team, on the men's team, sent my video into the group chat, into the wrestling group chat with my coaches and shit in it. And he was like, just in case anyone hadn't seen this yet. And I don't like this kid. We always kind of had I never really liked him. And he was always kind of flirting with me. I was never interested. And I think he was kind of he would neg me all the time, right. Do a little insult and being like, hey, want to hang out later? I'd be like, no. Anyways, so he sends this into the chat. Then I'm nervous. So I'm not typing anything because I didn't even know that he had seen it. And then 4 or 5 messages pouring, I agree with her. She's right. From the girls and the men's team that were both in the chat. So I was like, okay, dope. That was really the only time anyone tried to expose me or whatever for my.
Yeah, and you knew exactly what the little asshole's doing. I mean, it's clear as intent. And I love the language people use too. It's
just
always
in case anyone
helpful.
Hadn't seen this yet.
it's always so helpful, right?
I messaged him privately. I was why didn't you just talk to me about it? Why did you send it
exactly.
to me? And he was like, I just wanted to make sure everybody saw it. I was like, yeah, that's pretty shady.
Yeah, thank you for that, buddy. Thanks for that. So tell us a little bit about the views you have there. And like I said, it's going to be interesting. And obviously, everybody's going to be keeping a keen eye on the Olympics to see what does happen. I should look up the person's name right now while you're talking. But, yeah, tell me your. There you go. There you go.
See,
so tell me your take. Bingo, baby. Well, you're young. Your brain's not filled with garbage like mine is that you have to, smack out of there all the time. You can remember these things.
I guess. I smoke too much weed for that to be an excuse, though. Anyways.
Don't tell the Olympic Committee.
I know. So yeah, my views on this have always been consistent, and I want to make it clear to people in the comments or whatever who are going to see it. It's not out of hatred, bigotry, none of that. I don't want to ban people from transitioning or ban people from identifying how they want to identify. That's not what I'm about. It's about safety and it's about equality. And I feel like allowing people who are not biological women into women's sports just does away with Title IX. It just kind of makes it obsolete because then we'll have a men's division in sports and then basically a mixed sex or mixed gender or a co-ed version of sports. And, women just won't really have a fair chance. And this example is pretty much a right-wing fever dream, to be honest, of a huge trans woman who lived as a biological man for the majority of their life until they're about 40, late 30s, because they're 43 now, and is competing in powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, which is such a, because people were telling me oh, this never happens. What do you care if somebody competes in a high school volleyball tournament or golf or something that doesn't require a shit ton of strength or something or, pure brute force. But no, it's happening. And so Laurel Hubbard competed as a man for years, didn't do very well, did not make the Olympic team, did not, break any records or do anything very extraordinary. And now that they've been competing as a woman since I believe 2017 or 2018, fairly recently for, somebody who's 42 or 43.
A recent transition, yeah.
Yeah. is now on the Olympic team and won the Pacific Games, which is, the island games down there with, in the American Samoa and all those kind of things. And there was this podium picture that went kind of viral that I posted of Laurel Hubbard, who is very, very tall, very, very white, and these two short women on second and third place who are brown, like they're Pacific Islander, indigenous. And I was just like, the imagery here is very interesting because liberals must look at that and have to struggle between, is this white supremacist patriarchy or is this feminism in progress? Because to me, it looked like they were giving a spot, or they were taking a spot away from biological women who could have made the Olympic team or who could have won the Pacific Games. And another thing I researched a little bit was that the average age of these women's powerlifters are like they're like 25, they're under 30. Right. Because it breaks down a woman's body. I mean, I commend women who lift weight. I lift weights for wrestling, but it's not a very long career. People get injured and women's bodies just get injured from this long term. So for somebody who is middle-aged, women who are college age. Sorry, I know. Okay, so
you cut out just for a second. We lost you right after talking about just how women's bodies aren't going to hold up under that, and also how this guy's able to compete at an older age level. I think is where we cut out.
Yeah, so it's just it puts a little bit in perspective to see somebody who is like 43 competing with 25-year-olds, and they're beating them, by a good margin, and you're like, well, there's clearly a biological advantage here. And they're also like very, very tall. Like, I don't know their exact height, but they look at least like 6'2" or 6'3". So I'm just like, I don't know how anyone could not see this as unfair. But the IOC has said that as long as they're on estrogen and they lower the testosterone levels, which of course won't reverse their male puberty and won't reverse their male height and male arm span and male lung capacity and bone density. It very well may break down some muscle. But there's still a lot of advantages that come with just being born into a male body. It is what it is. But so this is the same IOC committee that it's like, we're going to be so woke that we're going to allow this, but we're not going to allow a black girl that smokes weed. Again, it looks like white supremacy to me. Like, that's just, if I was a leftist, I would be like, waving a flag and like, boycotting the Olympics or whatever. I would be up in arms about it.
It's very interesting that it's like they're both drug related because, you could argue that to transition to being a female, you're taking certain drugs or certain supplements or certain hormones that would adjust who you are, how your body performs. And, while I guess you could argue that it is a performance de-enhancer for a man to transition. Right. Well, exactly. That's exactly where I was going. So is weed. And it doesn't make any sense logically to argue that these two things can't. If you're going to have one, you're going to have the other. It's just absolutely absurd. And to your point, I mean, I'm all for trans. If you want to be trans, go for it. Live and let live. I have no issue with it. But
live your best trans life. I will not stop you.
Yeah, exactly. But like you said, it is empirically, you look at the differences and people will say, oh, there's no biological. It's a construct. It's not. There are clear biological differences.
I don't know what's going through people's minds. I don't know what's going through people's minds when they say that they don't live in reality. I feel like it may hurt their feelings to recognize that, if you genuinely have gender dysphoria and you might not like being told that you are biologically what you are, I get it. But people should not be rallying around a distorted viewpoint and being and enabling that to the point where it becomes the norm. So and a lot of trans people would agree. A lot of trans people would agree. I did a live stream with Blair White, who's a trans woman, who's a Republican, and I'm very respectful. Like, if someone wants me to call them a female name, like I'll call Blair. Like that's her legal name. Like, she legally changed her name to Blair. I've never known her as a man. That's it. But even Blair was telling me that if she was paired up with another woman, and she's small, like she's like 5'4", maybe like 120, 115. If they paired up by height and weight, she said she would still be stronger just because she feels like even though she's been under all the surgeries, she looks like a woman. She has a small frame, estrogen, boobs, all that. She would still be stronger. So I think it takes an unbiased view like that to recognize that it's not coming out of a place of hatred. It's not coming out of a place of like, I don't want to like, send any death threats or rude comments to Laurel Hubbard's way or anything like that. It's really on the IOC, I think. On some level though, I do think that, even if you are suffering from gender dysphoria and things like this, you do have to have a sense of like self-awareness to look at yourself and be like, why do I have to compete against the women though? Like, why do I have to? Because I think you can look internally and know that you look different and you are built differently than these girls, and it's just not going to be fair. So I do feel like to some level, it may stem from a little bit of misogyny. Like, you genuinely feel like you have the right to beat women in the sport that they worked their whole lives for and competing against other women for, and you haven't. But again, it's not like I think all trans people think like that. I just think to be a biological male and want to train or fight or compete against women, you probably are a little bit sexist, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe so. And there's also, any athlete, I did athletics growing up and all that in college and high school. So, it's one of those things where as an athlete too, you have that competitive mentality. And yeah, without a doubt, there's probably an aspect to it too of this is going to be an advantage. I now know that I can win and do better. Because like you said, the guy's 43, the girl. She is 43 and competing against far, far younger people. Clearly couldn't hold a candle to the other men in the sport, or wouldn't need to do this, or would have waited to transition, or at least had transitioned and still be competing as a man. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. But you said something that I want to come back to is just it's not fair. And when you talk about these people that argue these policies and argue progressive points of view, they always talk about how everything has to be fair, and this is the most unfair,
they're literally never
thing in sport.
They're never
right?
Athletes.
Which is supposed to be left on the field, right? Yeah, and of course not. Of course not.
I had people argue with me in the second video I did with the Daily Caller, basically doing a part 2 to the first video about trans athletes in sports. I had several comments from a lot of left libertarians because apparently my video made rounds on that side of Twitter, which is fine. I do follow a lot of I do follow some left libertarians. Some of them are pretty dope. Like I do have a couple that I like. But it made its ways to the super wokeitarians. And I had a couple comments that were like, who cares? It's just high school sports. There's nothing riding on it. It's just high school sports. It's just for fun. I'm like, that is coming from somebody who clearly never had to rely on a scholarship to get to college, never had to rely on sports to even be accepted into college, never had to rely on, winning something just to feel good about themselves. Like I like winning, I'm not saying I needed to survive. I work hard, but it's about giving equal opportunity. And they were like, well, you can't even find an example of this existing in high schools because the particular video I did was about public schools. And there's been an ongoing lawsuit in Connecticut about the top 2 track placers from 2017 to 2019 being 2 biological males who had transitioned to females in their teens. And they were always the top 2. Sometimes one would be first, one would be second, or vice versa, but they would always hold the top 2 spaces. And there was an interview with a girl who had came in like 3rd, 4th, 5th place. Like she was a top runner, but she was not winning anymore. Who said that it took the fun out of the sport because we all know who's going to win, and she's really competing for 3rd or 4th place. So even if it's not, riding on a college scholarship or a college acceptance or being scouted to a team, it's about having a fair chance to win. And I could tell it just kind of destroyed her self-esteem to go through that.
I do wonder also, so the two males who transitioned to females were both black, and the women complaining or the girls complaining were white. And I do in the back of my mind wonder if those were reversed, would this be getting more support? If they were black girls, let's say this is an underprivileged community and there were black girls that weren't able to get college scholarships. Do you think the media narrative would be changed on this rather than full-fledged support, people pointing out that they're taking opportunities away? But because it's a white chick, nobody's really worried about that because she'll still go to college, she'll still do whatever that, in their minds.
Yeah, I think people might have assumed like, oh, her parents will just pay for college. Like she don't need a track scholarship. Yeah. But as I said, it's not even about that. It's about the principle of it. It's about giving her an equal chance to win. And one of the girls that the Daily Caller did interview for this was actually, I believe she was biracial. She was at least part black. So it wasn't like it was like white against black or like it wasn't like minorities were separated. It just, it just so happened that the 2 trans athletes were both black. But I do think that there is some truth to that because once I pointed out, I posted this podium pic of Laurel Hubbard standing over these 2 women of color. Some people were like, that looks a little bit sus. Like that looks a little crazy. And then I went even further to say, like I said before, the IOC is woke enough to allow a white biological male into the women's division, but not a black girl who smokes weed. Yeah. Again, sometimes I like to play the left games just to point out the hypocrisy to them, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't really view it in such a racial lens, because I think it's more about the wokeness of transgenderism. I just think it's more like wokeness kind of left Black people behind. I think it's more about the LGBT movement now. So I don't think it's like about white supremacy, but it's just like they have more priorities now. So yeah.
Well, let's see. So I want to, 2 other topics I want to get into here. One is actually, before I do that, I'm going to transition to a quick plug for my buddy over at Burning Daylight, another podcast, which you should check out. You grew up shooting guns and hunting things. It's called Burning Daylight from Matt McKinley. He is a sponsor of our show, or I should say he's a big-time patron of ours. So give him a shout-out. Literally a cowboy that rides around, talking liberty, rustling some cattle. Well, not rustling. He's not stealing them, but, he's ushering them along. Anyway, it's a good listen and a good dude. So make sure to check that out, guys. Burning Daylight. So which one do you want to talk about first? We're talking about... before the show, I told you there were 2 stories I wanted to talk about with you, just off-topic news bits to break up, straight interview format. Do you want to talk about Britney first, or do you want to talk about the Jimmy Dore and the Young Turks going at each other's throats?
Let's talk about Britney.
Hashtag free Britney?
Free Britney. Leave Britney alone.
Leave Britney alone!
For real, though, because for the longest time, people were acting like all these conspiracy theorists were crazy. Like, I had been following Britney Spears' Instagram for some time, and I realized that, she was slowly going crazy. She was posting the same little dance videos over and over again. She looked a little bit unhinged. Her hair and makeup is kind of crazy. And she has this like shady ass boyfriend who it doesn't seem like they're married or anything. Doesn't seem like, but they've been together for a long time. So I wasn't sure what was going on. And she never posts pictures with friends, never posts pictures with her kids. It's like she doesn't, go out or see anybody. And of course, everybody else noticed that. I wasn't never a Britney Spears like super fan. Again, gonna make you old, but
I know she's outside of your time. She's my era, yeah.
Well, like when she was big, I was like 10 years old, so it wasn't like I was like listening to it that much. I do listen to her now, though. But even though that money
we all listen to Britney eventually.
Yeah, well, now that I know, every time I stream her songs, it's going to her dad, so that really sucks.
Yes, I know, exactly. So yeah, let's give a little bit of background here for people that don't know. So Britney Spears was recently in a courtroom arguing to have her conservatorship removed, and her father's controlled this for it's got to be decades now. It's got to be like
20 years.
Yeah, I mean, because she had that breakdown and was out, shaving her head and bashing cars and all that stuff, and she had a conservatorship put on. And her father, who is, from everything I can see, a scumbag, who wasn't even really that big of a part of her life, has now been put in charge of her money. He gives her, allocations for funding. He dictates how often she can do a lot of things, see her kids, what drugs she has to take. And it had come out in this court
if she can have kids or if she can get married.
Yeah,
Right. She came out and said that she was forced to have an IUD and she couldn't get married to her boyfriend, and they've been dating for like 5 or 6 years, and she wants to get married and have a family and all this kind of stuff, which is super ridiculous. And also, I think I know she might have, or maybe one of her sons has a restraining order against her father because he like hit them or shoved them or threw them into, I think he like shoved them into a wall or something, but he was like abusive to his grandsons, aka her sons. It just seems like he's like an all around like shitbag. And from what I've seen, the judge has basically no plans to release her or at least remove the dad from the conservatorship. Because I think at least if she must have a conservatorship, if she is that unstable, which I don't think she is, I think she is being trapped and, basically enslaved for her dad's profit. But they could at least give the conservatorship to somebody else, an impartial third party who's not going to
question. Her. Here's a question for you, and I agree. I wanted to talk about this story because I can't think of a better definition of modern day American slavery than what she is being put through by her father.
It sounds like a nightmare, to be honest.
He's literally forcing her to work. She said that she was forced to sit down and record, sit down and have studio time. Otherwise, she's threatened with not seeing her children.
And she's drugged with lithium and
being drugged
all the time.
Can you imagine? Well, that's the question I had for you. Yeah, do you think that she is, everything you see and kind of what happened with her, do you think it's because she is put on different drugs, she's forced in this lifestyle? I mean, who wouldn't go insane because
all those iconic pictures of her like crying and the paparazzi's catching her crying or shaving her head, umbrella,
I lost you again. Hold on. Go back to shaving your head. Whenever you, wait, I lost you at shaving your head. Now you're back.
Okay. But like all these pictures that were so iconic in like the early 2000s, like, oh my God, Britney's on like the front of a magazine, like being crazy and crying in front of paparazzi and yelling at paparazzi and like being seen being like dragged somewhere, stumbling in public. Like, I feel like it was because she was drugged and mentally ill and not, being taken care of. And it seems horrible to me. It seems sad.
Well, it's like one of those things, if you're forced into this lifestyle where you are, empirically not in control of anything in your life, you're definitely going to start breaking down mentally. And you're also going to take that out and probably start to abuse yourself to cope with it in other ways, like drinking too much, like maybe taking your meds too much. Like, I mean, just any number of things that people kind of go down once they start to find they have no control of their lives to try to exercise control, right? And then that
like,
comes out in different ways that can be very self-harming.
I'm looking at her, though, and I'm like, she does seem a little bit off her rocker. I'm not going to lie. She doesn't seem like she's all the way there, probably because she's on drugs.
She's got a little crazy eyes going.
She's very, she's very unhappy and she's been abused and essentially locked in her house for like 15, 20 years, just let out to go make her dad money. So I think
after being locked away, she didn't even get to be interviewed by Sam J like you did after the 5-day quarantine.
Yeah. So, I feel like anyone would go a little bit crazy from that. And I'm looking at all these other celebrities that are doing like crazy shit. I'm like, how are they not being forced into a conservatorship? Like, there are many celebrities who have had crazy mental breakdowns, have gone to rehab, have been drug addicts, have been homeless, have said like very just politically incorrect things. There have been celebrities who have been, sexual abusers, who have been, physical.
Where's Armie Hammer's conservativeship, right? The guy that wanted to eat people.
You read about him. Amber Heard
can we get Armor Hammer?
Yeah, I mean, he was a cannibal. Amber Heard is like beating the shit out of Johnny Depp every day.
Right.
She still gets movies. She doesn't have a conservatorship. Like, there's like crazy, awful people in Hollywood. And it's like, okay, maybe Britney, maybe she has done some damaging things to herself or to her brand, but she should have that right as an American to do whatever she wants to herself and to her brand. And she's not hurting anybody else. Like some of these other people are straight up abusing people. So I don't know how this shit is legal at all.
I don't either. That's what really boggles my mind about it. And again, it's hopefully one of those things that wakes Americans up to like, look, we need to look at what power you have and what you don't have and how the justice system is set up. Because if somebody can have their entire life controlled, removed over something as, I don't know, insignificant as kind of losing your shit when the paparazzi are chasing you and hounding you 24/7, an understandable amount of stress, then, who's to say all of us can be submitted to that?
And she was like, this is at the height of the paparazzi industry. Like, not everything. Now, celebrities are very easily reached on social media. Paparazzi pictures, like, they don't get paid as much because they can post a selfie and that'll be their picture for the day instead of paparazzi following them around to get their outfit or whatever. And Britney Spears was like the top pop icon at the time. She was probably being harassed like literally 24/7.
Yeah, and she was young. I mean, think how young she was at the time too. It's not like she's like 40 now. Man, Jesus, give the girl her life back.
This is like her entire life. And, it just, I don't know. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
Free Britney.
Okay,
leave
last
Britney
topic.
alone.
Leave Britney alone. Free her, then leave her alone. If send it free, and if she loves you, she'll come back to you, Dad. So the last thing, just real quick, and I'll make this story brief. I don't know how much you read about it, but right now, Jimmy Dore, who I actually like from a leftist perspective, I think he's very good on anti-war issues, the drug war. So he's got a lot of things I like, even though I don't agree with him on everything. He's a stand-up comedian and now a personality on YouTube and used to be on the Young Turks. He's in a war with the Young Turks, Cenk Unger, and his paramour, or he claims they're not in a relationship, but
whatever.
I'm blanking on her name. Yeah, whatever her name is. So what's interesting? Yeah, right. And well, I'll click on it and say it in a minute. But what's interesting about this is that Anna Kasparian, that's it.
Yeah,
is that we've long suspected, right, that a lot of these movements that are created from the left out of the best intentions, like Me Too, right? Hashtag Me Too was created with the best intentions from people with real harmful instances of what happened to them in life. A lot of people that were taken advantage of in Hollywood or in sports. I mean, even we're talking about like Olympics and wrestling. I think it was Ohio State had the wrestling coach involved in improprieties. Olympics, when the Olympics come out. I think, it was, I believe it was Ohio State's wrestling coach. And then the Olympics, a lot of the Olympics coaches were involved in improprieties, as they say. So they start off with these great intentions, right? And then it quickly becomes obvious that people grab them and run with them for their own vendettas. And, we talk about, like you were worried about, this is why I want to get into this, when you came out as being bisexual on Sam Jay's show, and you go, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about somebody coming after me with some allegation or some screenshot. But we see in this interaction between the Young Turks and Jimmy Dore, Anna Kasparian threatening Jimmy Dore with basically hashtag me tooing him over inappropriate comments that were made. And this is years ago.
And I saw the screenshot. I read the article you sent me to read up on it. And the last message that Jimmy sent was like, "Hey, hope all is well." And that was like in 2016. Great. And he was like,
so none of the outs.
Hope all is well. And she's like, "Thank you so much." Fast forward to 2021, she's like, "You know what? I remember you saying I looked sexy in my jeans and saying that you wanted to buy the same jeans for your wife so she could dress better. And I'm not going to forget about it. I'm going to expose you." I'm like, okay, is that inappropriate? I don't know what kind of workplace relationship they've had. If it was somebody I don't know, if it was, an older male boss of mine who I don't know that well, I would be like, yeah, that's pretty inappropriate. But I can't speak to their workplace relationship because like I have friends that I quote unquote sexually harass all the time, and it's fine.
And he's a comedian, and like you said, it's a lot of times it's developing on the relationship. Sometimes you sexually harass in the efforts of comedy. I'm sure he was joking around. I doubt he was seriously trying.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely imagine him saying like, "Oh, I like those jeans. Like they would look sexy on my wife. Like I need her to like wear. Like I don't know. It could have came across wrong, but it doesn't seem like he's a rapist. That's all."
Right, exactly. But it's just interesting to see, and this is what I want to get your take on this too, is I've seen far more, and granted, you're seeing this with libertarians and kind of the wokesters versus the non-woke and libertarian factions as well, and using kind of underhanded tactics. But you do tend to see, I think, more on the left than the right, at least so far, is the twisting and the no hesitation use of personal attacks, almost insignificant instances in the past to try to utterly destroy people. And that's what's interesting to me in watching this play out, and like kind of the Ouroboros of the snake eating its tail of how these people that are so in this space are operating.
Wait, let's talk about how she even came across to accuse him of this, because it didn't even have to do with him at first, right?
Right.
Because they were calling another YouTuber, they were calling somebody else.
Aaron Mate, I think, was like an independent journalist saying that he was a Russiagator and getting paid off by Russia is how it started.
Yeah, and that he was like for like Assad and shit. And so Jimmy Dore is like, no, like Russia, like this is a false allegation. And it didn't seem like anything that he said warranted him being accused of sexual harassment 5 years ago. And the sexual, it's like if you're gonna go all out and try to cancel someone, come up with like something better. Like I don't think anyone's genuinely gonna cancel anyone for saying, "Hey, you look hot in those jeans. You look hot in those jeans." Like that's the worst thing he said to you.
But
I'm sorry, like, I don't feel that bad. I don't feel that bad.
Nor should you. But you nailed it. That it's what's amazing to me is that trigger, right? It's like over what? Over him disagreeing with you and saying that you can't just say somebody's being paid off by Russia because they don't agree with you because they didn't think Russiagate and Trump was real, which we know it wasn't. I mean, that's what kind of surprised me is the vitriol and the "I will cancel you over" almost nothing. Like they could have let it go. They could have done their own show. What is it about the mentality of these people?
Topic. They could have just debated over that topic.
That would be the adult thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly have no idea. I don't know why the left does this, because as soon as you come for somebody else over something so minuscule and so tiny like that, and nobody's perfect. Everyone said something unsavory. Everyone said something that's not politically correct. Everyone has made somebody else feel uncomfortable. When somebody came up to me and everyone's said something that made somebody else uncomfortable, whether we know it or believe it or not. Like if somebody came up to me and it was like, "Hey, 5 years ago, you said my butt looked good in a singlet and it made me uncomfortable," I would be like, "Whoa, like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't remember that. I'm sorry." But it's like everyone has some shit. Like everyone has said shit like that. I don't know.
And like you said, you might not even remember it. I don't know if Jimmy Dore even remembers this. And also, how do you prove it? How do you prove it? You can't even prove it's true. It's not like she has it recorded. Is it on camera? I don't know. Probably
even
not.
Even if she had a GoPro video of Jimmy Dore looking at her and being like, "You look sexy hot in those jeans," I would like, what? Like, who cares?
All right. Exactly.
Like what? Like
Yeah.
I thought you were. It seemed like from the DM that was just barely shown that they had like a nice friendly relationship and that she liked him and that he liked her and generally were fine. So I don't see the issue.
I don't either. Well, this has been awesome. I'll wrap it up here. We're at an hour right now. So tell people where can they go to find you. I'm also going to link to this in the show notes, by the way. So I'll link to your Twitter and your pages. But just in case people are only listening, tell them where they can find you and follow you and everything else. Read you, watch you, etc.
Awesome. So I'm trying to get more subscribers on YouTube. It's just my name, Olivia Rondeau, Rondeau. And you can also find me on Twitter. And I just made a new Instagram for politics because I just had a thirst trap Instagram. And I was like, I don't want these random people from Twitter following that one. So let me make it.
I was going to say, you look sexy in that singlet. Don't hold it against me in 5 years. Oh, hold on. You cut out again. One more time. Cut out again. Go back to right after YouTube. Or you said you have a political Instagram, and then you started cutting out again. So pick up from there. Yeah, I'm not going to edit this, by the way, but just know that's where you left off.
Okay, yeah. Just search my name on all platforms, OLIVIARONDEAU, on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and you can find me. And I'm also a regular contributor to Fee, and I also do some video work for the Daily Caller, and I'm a columnist for the Rogue Review.
All right, there you go. Olivia, this has been a joy and a pleasure. Keep up the good work. Awesome talking to you, and I will keep Twitter bothering you, I'm sure, and joking with you. So hope to see you soon on the show or in various other formats, wherever they might be.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye-bye. All right, guys. Well, that was an interview with Olivia Rondeau. She's fantastic. I became a really big fan of hers, not only on Twitter, but also just in seeing, again, like on Sam J and interacting with her. She's a wonderful person. So please do check her out on all the platforms. Check us out on all the platforms. On Twitter at Lions of Liberty, we have our YouTube channel, which has crossed the 5,000 subscriber threshold, which is great. So keep liking that, subscribe it, share the podcast. And as the last reminder, Mark Claire, every Monday, has fantastic interviews on his show, the flagship Lions of Liberty. John Odermatt, Thursdays with Finding Freedom. Probably, we were talking about the guy that was with Olivia on the show there. I like his story. I'm going to try to get John to have him on because he does more of that, because he had a fascinating story, which Olivia covered, where he bought a defunct building, tried to turn it into a camp for underprivileged youth, especially black youth, and just went through a whole rigmarole with the state, with the Public Teachers Union. So fascinating stuff. Maybe John can get him on. But either way, check those shows out and hit the subscribe, hit the share button, and give us a 5-star review too, if you'd be so kind. Otherwise, that's going to do it. From me, Brian McWilliams, from the Lions of Liberty, and from Electric Libertyland, always stay plugged in to Liberty.